Well, welcome to Speaking of Horses. I'm your host, Wayne Williams, and we're ready to go right here with some of the great stories from the horse industry. So join us as we get ready to go Speaking of Horses right here on this station. Well, hey, welcome to Speaking of Horses, and my guest today, Tracy Baker from Equaide. And Equaide is a product that's, it may have been out there and been available longer than you may know. But Tracy, good morning, and tell us a little bit about some of the various wounds and injuries that you've been able to help and work with this product.
Good morning, Wayne. This is a wonderful chance to discuss the product with you again. We have been able to work with horse injuries since 1998, and the majority of our injuries are found on the lower limbs of horses. The hock injuries are the worst probably for owners. They get caught in a wire, or they just find their horses out in the fields, and they come in and they work with them with washing and cleaning wounds. But horses tend to grow what's called proud flesh. It's exuberant granulation tissue, which is the tissue that grows to cover a void so that the skin can then grow across. And the skin grows very, very slowly on the lower limbs of horses. So that tissue tends to think that the wound hasn't filled in for the skin to grow across. So we have found that Equaide is able to decrease the size of proud flesh growth. It'll reduce it down to the healthy levels of granulation bed so that the skin can grow across. And we've worked with, hock injuries, hoof injuries, bulbs of heels are another big one. We've also been used on the head of horses, ears, forelocks, the pole where horses might have hit their head on the top of a trailer, entering a trailer, and they hit their head. Saddle sores. We get a lot of calls for summer sores, which is an actual parasite that invades a small wound and then grows exuberant granulation tissue because it just can't heal, very slow healing wounds. And we get a lot of shoe boil injuries, actually, from where the hoof hits the elbow of the horse a lot. So, yeah, we kind of see a little bit of everything.
Well, one of the things that always, you look at a horse and a leg injury, and horses tend to always injure areas that are the hardest to heal. And when you're down on when you've got an injury on the leg or whatever, not only is it generally an injury in a joint or near a joint that flexes, which makes it tougher for the skin to heal up, but it's also in an area that because they're injured there, they don't move as much, and they don't move as much, they don't get as much blood flow. Therefore, this slows down the healing process even more. So give us some insight into those type of injuries.
Well, when we work with people with the hock, that tends to be one of the most terrifying injuries that an owner can see, and because they have a hard time wrapping it. The inside of the hock is very difficult because the leg flexes, and it looks like that big elbow on the back of the horse and the back legs, for listeners that don't know what the hock is. And it actually is the heel on a human, which is kind of something that people don't realize. We are the same. We have the same types of areas of our body. But because that flexes, it makes it very difficult to wrap because it's high up. So they usually, for hock injuries, we tell people to stack wrap. So you're going to wrap the lower part of the leg right from the hoof up, and then put another bandage over the wound area and wrap that as well, and kind of do a figure eight around so that hock can still flex. And with Equaide, it does not need to be a really tight wrap. Because Equaide's doing the work on the proud flesh or the wound itself. A lot of veterinarians through the years believe that, you need to have a pressure wrap to keep that tissue inside, and that actually is not necessary with Equaide. But just having Equaide there is going to take care of that, the wound surface. We just kind of want it wrapped just to keep other things from not damaging the tissue and keeping it clean, you know. But you don't need to have it tight because, as you said, if you make something really tight, the horse doesn't want to move around, it decreases circulation to that skin. And if you think about it, those are the smallest blood vessels that are feeding the skin tissue. And if you cut off that circulation, it's not going to be able to grow as quickly because it's losing its nutrition, which is through the blood. So you just need a light bandage, just there, snug enough to hold it up there, but not so tight and that it's going to decrease circulation to that surface. And believe it or not, if you just touch your finger, think about your fingertip, you push pressure down, it turns white, you know, that you lose circulation to that skin. It doesn't take much to lose that. So being really careful not to put too much pressure on that bandage, and that's why we recommend stack wrapping on hocks. Anywhere actually, like a fetlock, which is the lower joint just before the hoof, just above the hoof. We also just a snug bandage, nothing really tight. Heel bolt, we recommend a bandage because that is closest to the ground, and they tend to step in all sorts of things that are left behind. So you definitely want to have a light bandage over a heel bulb injury until that's closed up. But yeah, we don't recommend strong, tight bandaging. We just a light bandage over it.
Well, let me ask you this, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, in most cases, whether it's the horse's body or if it's in injuries with humans, the human body, but the body does its own healing. What you're doing with any of the bandaging, the Equaide, any of those things that you're doing, you're merely assisting that body so that it set the stage so it can go ahead and heal itself. Is that correct?
Yes, Equaide provides the ideal environment for healing, for the body to naturally heal itself. It'll actually adhere like a scab. It'll stay there once it's at a healthy granulation bed. It'll actually adhere like a normal scab. It works with the horse's own matrix of plasma and things that are coming out of any wound, and it allows the skin to lift it off on its own. Where, like, if you use an ointment, it will what's called maceration. It kind of keeps oxygen from getting to the skin. Petroleum products are a barrier, so they don't breathe as well. So you have to be very careful when you're using ointments and things not to be too thick. Whereas Equaide is a water-based product, so it breathes all the time. It can allow air in. So you definitely want to make sure that the body's ability to heal on its own has all the abilities to.
Right.
So if you block one, you could be damaging something. So you have to be careful with skin and wounds that you're not making more harm.
Right, and when you block those, as you say, that's when you wind up getting more scar tissue, more scarring, and more of the effects that's really tough to correct later. Correct. Yeah. So tell us again, remind us exactly, kind of what Equaide really is.
Well, it's a mineral-based product, actually, it was formulated to remove proud flesh. That was its intended purpose, was to remove proud flesh on horses. And with doing that, we also found that it accelerated skin closure on some really difficult to heal wounds. So it's twofold. It removes proud flesh. It prevents it from forming. In its natural properties, it's antibacterial and antifungal. It doesn't have a pain reliever in it per se, but it reduces inflammation. So the pain is reduced when you don't have that added inflammation. It stays where you put it. Like I said, it'll adhere like a scab, so it can be used without a bandage, which is great for up on the upper body on horses. It can be used around the eyes. We don't recommend you put it right in the eye, but it definitely can be used around the eye because it does stay where you put it. And it's just been a wonderful product for us and for so many of our friends in the horse world, and it's also used on dogs and farm animals. It works on all animals, so we're really happy with where it's gone and how it's been helping so many animals.
Well, everybody out there that's got horses especially understands that there needs to be some kind of a first aid kit close by, because horses do have a tendency. I mean, we used to have our horses stabled on a dairy farm. You know, you can turn those cows out there, or cattle, out, and you can have stuff and growing up, and you can have old rakes and harrows and things out there and growing up in weeds, and cows just don't get themselves injured. Horses will find it, and they will get themselves injured. They just have a knack to do that, all right? And everybody with horses knows that you have to have that first aid kit, handy to handle that stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
And of course, go ahead.
Equaide, having a small jar of Equaide in your first aid kit, you can prevent proud flesh from forming right as soon as you find the horse. Like, as soon as you find the injury, if you have Equaide with you, you won't get the proud flesh on those injuries. And if you have an injury, say a horse was out, playing with its herd mates out in the field, and they, bit each other, and you got a little bite mark or something, Equaide can be really beneficial in that area too, because up on the upper body, they tend to like to grow white hairs. And if you have some of these horses that, you can see these marks quite readily.
Right.
So you want to make that hair grow back as natural as you can. So
well, I've always had a Palomino, and boy, there's nothing worse than having that big white circle show up somewhere and kind of destroy that Roy Rogers trigger look,
That's right.
Hey,
Beautiful
Tracy,
thought.
it's been a pleasure to have you with us. We're running out of time, but again, how do people contact you in Equaide?
You contact us, either you can call us at 1-888-330-7107 or online with www.equaide.com. That's EQUAIDE.com.
Well, it's wonderful talking with you. Our time has all but expired, but Tracy, we appreciate you being with us, and thanks for joining us here on Speaking of Horses.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.
Well, that's our show. I'm your host, Wayne Williams. Speaking of Horses, we'll be back next week with a brand new show. Or join us at speakingofhorses.com.